The morning my grandmother's will was supposed to be read, I was running late because I stopped to help a stranger in the rain. I know how that sounds. Trust me, if I had known what the next 3 hours would do to my life, I might have stopped sooner. I had been awake since 4 in the morning, not because I was grieving, though I was, quietly, in the way you grieve someone you loved, while also loving them from a careful distance. My grandmother, Nana Ruth, had passed 11 days earlier at 81, in the house she had lived in since before my mother was born. A Victorian semi-detached in Oakville, Ontario, 2 blocks from the lake, with a wraparound porch she refused to paint anything but cream. She had been sharp until the end. Sharp enough, apparently, to make changes to her estate documents 3 months before she died. Changes that my brother Derek had known about. Changes that I had not. I found that out from our family's longtime solicitor, who had called me the week after the funeral and said, carefully, that there were some matters requiring clarification before the formal reading could proceed. His tone had told me everything his words didn't. So I had spent the past 11 days going through every document I could find. Old birthday cards. The accordion folder, Nana Ruth, kept in the bottom drawer of her antique writing desk, which Derek had tried to have moved to storage the day after the funeral, before I blocked the driveway with my car and refused to move until our cousin Margaret witnessed what was inside it. Bank statements. A copy of her original will from 2019, which I had taken to a print shop on Lakeshore Road and photocopied 3 times. The reading was scheduled for 10 in the morning at the solicitor's office on Trafalgar Road. I left my apartment in Burlington at 8:30 to give myself time, which I thought was generous, until the QEW slowed to a crawl past Bronte and I sat in construction traffic for 40 minutes watching my buffer disappear. By 9:45, I had parked 2 blocks from the office and was speed walking through a drizzle that had turned into something heavier and more committed. I had an umbrella, but the wind kept inverting it, which felt appropriate for the day. I almost walked past him. He was sitting just outside the covered entrance of a pharmacy, in a manual wheelchair, wearing a belted raincoat that had seen better decades. He had a briefcase on his lap, actual leather, the old kind with brass clasps, and he was trying to unfold a piece of paper that the wind kept snatching out of his hands. He looked to be in his mid-70s, silver hair, trimmed neat, glasses with thick, dark frames. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe because he reminded me of someone. Maybe because I was already late, and the brain sometimes makes reckless decisions under stress. I stepped in front of him and caught the paper before it flew into the street. "Here," I said, handing it back. He looked up at me and smiled, the kind of smile that rearranges a person's whole face. "Thank you. It's a terrible morning to be made of paper." I laughed before I meant to. "Are you waiting for someone?" "A cab," he said, which was supposed to arrive 20 minutes ago and has apparently relocated to another dimension. I looked at my phone. 9:47. The office was 4 minutes away if I walked fast. 6. Pushing a wheelchair on wet sidewalk. "Where are you going?" I asked. He told me the address. I stood there for a moment with rain hitting the back of my neck. "That's where I'm going," I said. He tilted his head. "Is it?" "There's a will reading. At 10. Something shifted in his expression just slightly, just for a second. Then he nodded once and said, "Well, I suppose we're going to the same place." I took the handles of his wheelchair and started pushing. He didn't offer his name, and I didn't ask. We talked about the rain, about the construction on the QEW, about a bakery on the corner that he said used to make proper butter tarts before it became a smoothie place. He was easy to talk to in the way that people sometimes are, when there's no social performance required, when you're just 2 people moving through weather towards something neither of you is entirely looking forward to. When we turned onto Trafalgar and the office building came into view, I saw Derek's Range Rover parked directly in front of the entrance in a no-stopping zone. Of course, Derek had driven a Range Rover since he was 28, 6 years after Nana Ruth quietly co-signed a loan he never fully paid back, a detail I had found in the accordion folder. The lobby was warm and smelled like old carpet and printer ink. The receptionist looked up when I pushed the door open and clocked me, and then the man in the wheelchair, and then me again. She smiled in a way that seemed careful. "The Callaway Estate reading?" I said. "Second floor," she said. "There's a lift at the end of the hall." I got him to the lift and pressed the button, and we waited. He had the briefcase on his lap, both hands resting on top of it, perfectly still. "Thank you for the ride," he said. "Of course," I said. "Are you a family friend?" He looked at the lift doors. "Something like that." We went up together. The second-floor hallway had 4 chairs outside a frosted glass door, and Derek was already standing in the corridor with his jacket on and his phone in his hand, the way he always stood when he wanted to appear busy and important. He was 38. 6 years older than me. He had Nana Ruth's cheekbones and our father's absolute certainty that whatever he wanted was also correct. He looked up when the lift doors opened. He saw me. Then he saw the man in the wheelchair behind me. The color did not exactly leave his face, but something happened to it, a kind of recalibration. His jaw moved once, then settled. Glare, he said. Derek, I said. He looked at the man in the wheelchair again. His eyes stayed there a beat too long. Who is this? Someone who needed a push in the rain, I said. Derek opened his mouth and then closed it. He looked back at his phone. I knocked on the frosted glass door and a voice called us in. The solicitor was a man named Howard Park, who had handled Nana Ruth's affairs for over 20 years, and who I had always found to be scrupulously neutral in the way of a good referee. He stood when we entered and shook hands with me, then turned to the man in the wheelchair, and something passed between them, not a greeting exactly, more like a recognition, and Howard said, "Thank you for coming," in a tone that meant something more than politeness. The room had a long oak table, 4 chairs on one side and 2 on the other, a window overlooking a parking lot. Howard sat at the head. I sat to his left. Derek took the chair across from me, set his phone face down on the table, and leaned back with the posture of a man who has already decided how the meeting ends. The man in the wheelchair positioned himself slightly to the side, not at the table, briefcase still on his lap. Derek looked at him. Why is he in here? Howard said, Mr. Beaumont is here in a professional capacity. I'll explain as we proceed. Derek said, I don't understand why. Derek, Howard said, in a tone that was not unkind but very final. Let's begin. Howard opened a folder, and I watched Derek pick up his phone again, glance at it, and set it down. He was performing calm. I had watched him perform calm my entire childhood at dinner tables, at school events, in our father's study, and I knew the performance well enough to know what it was covering. I had spent 32 years being the quiet one, the one who drove Nana Ruth to her cardiology appointments at Hamilton Health Sciences when Derek was tied up with work, the one who organized her medications into a weekly pill case and labeled them in large print with a Sharpie, the one who fixed the leak under her kitchen sink and painted her back fence and sat with her on the porch on Thursday evenings drinking tea while she told me stories about her girlhood in Cape Breton. I had not done those things to earn anything. I want to be clear about that. I did them because I loved her. But it does matter. It matters in a specific and legal way when someone exploits the quiet one's absence from the paperwork. Howard began reading. The original will, dated 2019, had been straightforward. The house in Oakville to be split between Derek and me. Her savings approximately $340,000 in a combination of GICs and a registered account at RBC divided equally. Personal effects to be distributed as agreed between family members. A small bequest to Street Matthew's Anglican Church in Oakville where she had sung in the choir for decades. Then Howard said, in August of last year, Ruth Calloway executed an amended will and a new power of attorney document. Derek picked up his coffee cup, looked into it, set it down. The amended will, Howard continued, designates Derek James Calloway as sole beneficiary of the estate, including the property at, and he read out Nana Ruth's address and all liquid assets held in her name. I kept my hands flat on the table. The power of attorney, Howard said, granted Derek James Calloway authority over Ruth Calloway's financial affairs beginning September 1st of last year. I said quietly, she had a cardiac event in October. Howard looked at me over his reading glasses. Yes. While she was in hospital. For 11 days. Yes. And during that time, I said, certain transfers were made. Howard paused. Then he set down the paper he was holding. That, he said, is where we encounter a complication. Derek said, there's no complication. The will is clear. I reached into my bag and took out a folder. Nana Ruth had a habit that drove Derek crazy and that I had always found endearing. She kept physical copies of everything. Every bank statement, mailed to the house the old-fashioned way, collected in the accordion folder in the writing desk. Every letter, every notice, every transaction record. 11 days of statements from October, when she was in the cardiac unit at Joseph Brant Hospital in Burlington, showed 4 transfers totaling $67,000 out of her primary checking account. The transfers went to an account I didn't recognize. When I ran the account number through the Federal Corporate Registry, you can do this online, it takes 4 minutes. It came back registered to a numbered company in which Derek was listed as the sole director. A numbered company he had incorporated 8 months before Nana Ruth's cardiac event. 8 months before. I put the folder on the table. Derek said, that's you don't understand how estate management works. When you have power of attorney, You are authorized to manage her affairs for her benefit, I said, not to transfer her savings to your own corporate account. It was a loan structure. There is no loan documentation, I said. I checked. Derek stood up. Howard, she doesn't have standing to contest. She's not the executor. She's a named beneficiary under the 2019 will, Howard said, which she has provided in original form, and she has raised questions about the circumstances under which the 2023 amendment was executed. Specifically, the question of undue influence. The room went quiet. Derek sat back down. I had spent 3 weeks learning what undue influence meant in the context of a state law in Ontario. It means that a testator, the person making the will, was pressured or manipulated into making changes they would not otherwise have made freely. It is notoriously difficult to prove. You have to demonstrate that the person was vulnerable, that the influencer had a position of trust, and that the resulting document benefited the influencer in a way that is inconsistent with the testator's known wishes and prior conduct. I had, in that accordion folder, 11 years of Christmas cards from Nana Ruth, in which she wrote in her large looping cursive that she wanted the house to stay in the family and be shared equally. I had 3 years of Thursday evening texts, in which she asked me to look at things, the furnace, the eavesdropp, a suspicious charge on her visa, and not once, in any of them, did she mention wanting to change her will. I had a note she had written me on my 29th birthday that said, simply, "The house will be yours too, lovey. I've made sure." I had the signed statement of Nana Ruth's family doctor, who had been her physician for 14 years and who noted in writing that in their last appointment before the will amendment, Ruth had expressed anxiety about family pressure without specifying further. I put all of it on the table, one document at a time. Derek's performance of calm was failing in visible increments. His knee was moving under the table. I could see it. He had done that as a kid too, a tell he'd never managed to correct. He said, "This is all circumstantial." Then Mr. Beaumont spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. His voice was measured and unhurried. He said the transfers you executed during the period of October 4th through 14th constitute a potential violation of Section 331 of the Criminal Code. That's fraud against a person under disability. He opened his briefcase and removed a small stack of documents with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this 10,000 times. I've reviewed the transaction records your sister provided. I've also reviewed the incorporation documents for the numbered company, the dates of which are, as she noted, somewhat difficult to explain innocently. Derek stared at him. "Who are you?" "My name is Gerald Beaumont," he said. "I'm a retired Superior Court judge. I currently sit on the board of the Ontario Law Society's Elder Abuse Prevention Panel." He placed the documents on the table and slid them toward Howard. "I was Ruth Calloway's first client when I opened my practice in 1987. She sent me a letter in September asking me to look into something for her. I was in Vancouver for most of the fall, which is why we're only speaking now." He looked at Derek steadily. She knew something was wrong. She just needed someone to look. The silence in the room had a particular texture, the kind that happens when a very large thing has just shifted and everyone present can feel it, but no one has moved yet. Derek said, "I want to call my lawyer." Gerald said, "That would be wise." Derek pushed back his chair and left the room. I heard him in the hallway, his voice low and fast, and no longer performing anything. Howard looked at me across the table. He looked tired in the way of someone who has been waiting for a thing to resolve and has finally watched it begin to. "She called me too," he said, "in September. She said she wasn't sure about some things, but she didn't want to upset anyone. She asked me to keep the original will on file." He closed his folder. "I'm glad you found the statements." I looked down at the table. Nana Ruth had loved Derek. I want to say that because it matters. She had loved him in the complicated way. You love someone who is always charming and always slightly out of reach, who makes you feel special in short bursts and keeps you hoping for more. She had co-signed that loan and never mentioned it to me and probably told herself it would work out. She had probably let him come by on Sunday mornings to check on her and felt grateful for it, not knowing he was also taking photographs of her documents. She had been 81 and she had been tired and her heart had been making decisions it shouldn't. But she had also, in her quiet way, made sure there was a paper trail. She had kept every statement she had written me that birthday note. She had called Gerald Beaumont in September and written him a letter in her large curling hand and asked him to please look into something when he had a chance. She had been, until the end, herself. It took 11 more weeks to resolve fully. Derek retained a criminal defense lawyer, and the two of them spent most of that time in negotiation with the Ontario Crown. The fraud charges were serious. $67,000 transferred under power of attorney into a personally held company is not a gray area. Whatever Derek's lawyer tried to argue about estate management structures. In the end, Derek agreed to a full repayment order and a conditional discharge on the criminal side, which meant no conviction if he completed conditions including repayment and a prohibition from ever holding power of attorney over another individual. The 2023 will amendment was set aside by the court on the basis of undue influence. The 2019 will was reinstated. The house in Oakville went into a trust and eventually to me. Not because I wanted to win something, because Nana Ruth had wanted it that way and written it down in every form she could think of, as if she knew she'd need every one of them. The morning after the court order came through, I drove to Oakville and let myself in with the key I'd had since I was 19. It was February. The porch was icy and I should have salted it. I sat in her kitchen with the lights off for a while, in the chair she always sat in, looking out at the backyard where the garden had gone brown and still under snow. I texted Gerald Beaumont to say thank you. He texted back within the minute. Ruth chose well, he wrote. She always did. I put my phone down and stayed in her chair a while longer. The house smelled like her, like cedar sachets and the lavender hand cream she kept on the kitchen windowsill, and something underneath that was just old wood and long time. I had spent so many Thursday evenings in this kitchen that the sounds of it were familiar to me the way your own heartbeat is familiar. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the cast iron rad in the corner, the way the third step on the stairs creaked differently from the others. She had wanted me to have this. She had said so. She had put it on paper and then put more paper behind it and then called a retired judge from 35 years ago and asked him, gently, to please look into something when he had the chance. There's something people say about quiet women, women who don't make scenes, women who show up with casseroles and pill organizers and Thursday evenings. People say those women are passive, easy to overlook, safe to manage. They are sometimes wrong about that.